I need you to understand this before anything else. What I'm about to tell you is not a metaphor, not a figure of speech, and not something softened by time. For 60 consecutive nights, I was the one holding my little girl's hands while she swallowed poison. I watched her trust me, I watched her suffer. And even though the law later said I was innocent, this truth is one I will carry until my last breath. Every night, precisely at 7:45 p.m., the routine never changed. I would sit beside my daughter, brushing her hair back gently, telling her it was going to help her get stronger. And every night, my husband stood nearby with a glass filled with a thick, dark liquid he claimed was medicine. I believed him. I had no reason not to. He was respected, educated, admired. And I was just a mother who wanted to do the right thing. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm 72 years old and I was born and raised in Portland, Oregon, a city of rain-soaked sidewalks, quiet resilience, and people who keep their pain tucked behind polite smiles. I still live here today in the same city that raised me, broke me, and somehow stitched me back together again. I started taking long walks nearly 16 years ago after my doctor told me grief doesn't disappear if you ignore it, it settles into your bones. At first, walking felt unbearable, every step dragged memories behind it. But eventually, the river path near Hawthorne Bridge became my refuge. I talked to God there, I talked to myself, and slowly I learned how to breathe again. Today, I live in a modest house on the east side of the city, not far from St. Matthew's Chapel. It's nothing special, 2 bedrooms, a narrow porch, and a small yard where I grow lavender and roses. In the afternoons, I sit outside with my knitting while traffic hums in the distance. My 2 cats, Maple and Ash, curl at my feet. It's a quiet life, a rebuilt life. I decided to record this story because for decades I carried it alone. I carried the guilt, the confusion, and the unbearable question of how a mother can live under the same roof as evil and not recognize its face. I believed I had a safe home, a stable marriage, a child who was protected. But love can be blinding, and danger doesn't always arrive screaming, it sometimes whispers gently, wearing the face of someone you trust. This is a story about that blindness, about how easily devotion can be manipulated. And about the moment a mother realizes that obedience can be just as deadly as neglect. This journey begins long before my daughter was born, back in my childhood, in a simpler time when trust came easily and fear had not yet learned my name. And what happened next is where everything truly began to unravel. Before I ever became a wife or a mother, I was simply a child who believed the world was mostly good. And that belief, soft, unguarded, unquestioning, was planted deep in me long before I knew it could be used against me. I was born on a cold February morning in 1953 during one of those steady Oregon rains that seem to soak straight into your thoughts. My mother, Helen, delivered me at home with the help of a local midwife in our small house near the Selwood district. My father, Thomas Whitfield, worked repairing rail lines that cut across the city like scars. He was a quiet man, stern on the outside but dependable in the way that made you feel safe just knowing he was nearby. Our house was small, 3 rooms, thin walls, creaky floors, but it was clean and warm. I shared a bedroom with my older sister, Ruth, and my younger brother, Samuel, slept in a cot beside my parents' bed. Winters were harsh. Cold air slipped through the window frames, and we huddled near a space heater wrapped in wool blankets my mother stitched herself. We didn't have much, but we had routines. My mother scrubbed the floors every Saturday. My father brought his paycheck home on Fridays and handed it to her without counting it. That trust, quiet, unquestioned, was the backbone of our home. My mother worked as a seamstress, sewing dresses and repairing clothes for women in the neighborhood. I remember the steady rhythm of her old machine, the sound carrying late into the night. She taught me early how to thread a needle, how to sew straight, how to be useful. "A steady hand keeps a steady life," she used to say. School was 6 blocks away. I walked there rain or shine, my shoes soaked half the year. I loved learning. Reading felt like opening doors to other worlds. My teacher, Mrs. Keller, once told my parents I was observant, too observant maybe. I noticed things other children didn't: tone changes, silences, expressions that didn't quite match words, but despite that I was trusting to a fault. My mother warned me often, "Not everyone who speaks softly means well." I nodded, but I didn't truly understand. To me, adults were authorities, husbands knew best, professionals were to be obeyed. Questioning felt like disrespect. As I grew older, my dreams were simple: marriage, children, a peaceful home. I wanted the kind of life my parents had: predictable, safe, unquestioned. What I didn't know then was that unquestioned trust can become a cage, and once you're inside it, you don't hear the lock click shut. Because not long after those dreams began to take shape, I met a man who seemed like the answer to every prayer: calm, intelligent, admired. And that was the moment my real education began. I met Daniel Harper on a winter evening in 1970 at a small community gathering held in a converted school hall on Belmont Street. I had just turned 17. The room smelled of coffee and floor polish, and a local band played softly in the corner. Teenagers laughed too loudly, couples swayed without rhythm, and then there was Daniel standing apart from the noise, watching everything with quiet focus. He wasn't handsome in the way other boys tried to be, no wild gestures, no loud jokes. He wore neatly pressed trousers, a pale shirt tucked in just right, wire-rimmed glasses perched carefully on his nose. While others danced, he observed. That alone made him different. My friend Clara introduced us. Daniel shook my hand instead of pulling me into a dance. His grip was firm, controlled. When he spoke, he chose his words carefully, as if each one mattered. "May I walk you home?" he asked later that evening, not flirtatious, not playful, serious. We began seeing each other slowly. Daniel never rushed things. He didn't overwhelm me with affection, but he was always present. He showed up on time. He listened. He asked about my family. He spoke respectfully to my father and discussed work with him like an equal. That impressed everyone. Daniel worked in pharmaceutical distribution and planned to take over a small local business from his uncle. He talked about responsibility, about order, about protecting what mattered. My mother liked that he was steady. My father admired his discipline, and I mistook his restraint for strength. We married in the spring of 1972, quietly at a neighborhood chapel not far from where I live today. I was 19. He was 23. We moved into a modest rental home with a tidy kitchen and a small fenced yard. It felt like a fresh start. The early years were calm. Daniel worked long hours. I kept the house. He paid every bill on time. He read professional journals late into the night, sitting in silence while I slept. Sometimes I woke to find him still awake, staring at nothing in particular. When I asked if something was wrong, he smiled faintly and said, "Just thinking." Our daughter Lily was born in July of 1974. She was small, bright-eyed, curious. Daniel held her carefully, almost stiffly, like something fragile and sacred. "She has to be protected," he said often. The world ruins things. At first, I found his protectiveness comforting. He didn't want strangers touching her, he didn't like loud gatherings. He insisted on cleanliness, on routines. I told myself it was love, but love doesn't isolate. Love doesn't tighten its grip with every passing day. When Lily turned 4, Daniel began reading more obsessively. Medical texts, chemical manuals. He spoke of purity, of prevention, of dangers no one else seemed to see. And then, one night, he told me he had developed something special for our daughter, something that would change everything. The night Daniel introduced the supplement was the same night I learned how easily fear can be disguised as expertise. It was late summer, warm enough that the windows were still open. Lily had just celebrated her 4th birthday, nothing big, just a small cake and a few wrapped gifts on the dining table. Daniel didn't like crowds, so it was only family. After everyone left, he asked me to sit down in the kitchen. He removed his glasses, cleaned them carefully, and spoke in the measured tone he used when he wanted to sound certain. "I've been reviewing developmental studies," he said. "Lily is entering a sensitive phase. Her body needs support. I suggested we take her to a pediatrician." His jaw tightened. "Doctors follow protocols, not truth," he replied. "I know what I'm doing." That should have been the moment I stood up, but I didn't. I trusted him. I always had. That night he locked the kitchen door from the inside. I remember thinking it was odd but not alarming. I stayed in the living room with Lily, helping her play with her new dolls. 20 minutes later, Daniel emerged holding a tall glass filled with a thick, dark violet liquid. He knelt in front of her and smiled, too fixed, too deliberate. "Daddy made you something special," he said. "It's to help you grow strong." Lily sniffed it. "It smells funny." "Medicine often does," he replied. "You have to drink it all." She looked at me. I nodded. That nod still haunts me. She took one sip and winced. "It's bitter." "That's how you know it's working," Daniel said gently. She finished it, and within seconds her legs buckled. Her eyes rolled back. She collapsed. I screamed. I ran forward, but Daniel caught her first, calm, precise. "It's normal," he said. "Her body needs rest to absorb it." He carried her to bed and sat beside her in the dark, whispering words I couldn't understand. When I asked him to turn on the light, he refused. "She's fine," he insisted. "Go rest." Every instinct in me was screaming, but I obeyed. From that night on, the ritual became law. Every evening at exactly 7:45, Daniel locked himself in the kitchen. I heard the blender, glass clinking, the steady rhythm of preparation. Then the glass, the smile, the fainting. Within weeks, Lily changed. Her cheeks hollowed. Her skin dulled, her hair began to fall out in soft clumps. I showed Daniel the strands in my trembling hand. "It's purification," he said coldly. "The body sheds what it doesn't need." When I begged him to stop, he stepped close and whispered, "Do you trust me or do you want her ruined?" I lowered my eyes. That was the moment I surrendered my voice. And that silence, heavy, obedient, terrified, nearly cost my daughter her life. But silence can only last so long, and soon it would shatter. Pain announced itself before I was ready to face the truth. Lily began waking before dawn, curled into herself, crying that her stomach was on fire. She clutched her side with both hands, trembling, sweat soaking her nightgown. I held her, pressed warm cloths to her skin, whispered prayers into her hair. Nothing helped. The pain only eased hours later, leaving her limp and exhausted. Daniel watched all of it with clinical calm. "It's her organs adjusting," he explained. "The body resists healing." Healing. The word echoed in my head like a lie that refused to break. One morning, I pulled back her bedsheet and froze. There were dark stains on the mattress. Blood. Not much, but enough. Lily was pale, barely conscious. When I carried her into the living room, Daniel was drinking coffee, reading the paper. "She's bleeding," I said. "We're going to the hospital." He folded the newspaper slowly. "No." That single word drained the air from the room. He stepped toward me, his voice dropping low. "Hospitals interfere, they poison, only I can finish this." I screamed then. I didn't recognize my own voice. Lily whimpered in my arms. Daniel's composure cracked, his face twisted with fury I had never seen. "You will not take her anywhere," he hissed. "Do you hear me?" And then, just as quickly, he smoothed himself out, apologized, promised it would end soon. Just a few more weeks. Fear settled into me like ice. Lily grew weaker by the day. She stopped playing. She stared at nothing. Her skin thinned until blue veins showed beneath it. I tried once, only once, to give her water instead of the drink. Daniel noticed immediately. He took her chin in his hand, forced the glass to her lips, and said softly to me, "Never do that again." That night, I heard him talking in the dark. I crept closer and listened. "They want her," he whispered, "but I won't let them. She must stay pure." When I asked who they were, he looked through me and said, "The shadows." That was when understanding struck like lightning. This wasn't medicine, this was madness. That night I held Lily and listened to her shallow breathing. I didn't sleep. I planned. I knew I had one chance, because if I waited any longer, there wouldn't be a daughter left to save. The next morning, Daniel left early. He prepared the evening dose in advance and locked the kitchen, handing me the key. 7:45 sharp, he reminded me. I nodded. But inside, something had changed. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a mother with nothing left to lose, and by nightfall I would either expose the truth or bury my child. The house felt different the moment Daniel left that morning, too quiet, as if it were holding its breath along with me. Lily lay curled on the sofa, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes half open but unfocused. I sat beside her, counting every rise and fall of her chest, afraid that if I looked away even for a second, it might stop. Her hand in mine felt too light, too fragile, like something already slipping away. All day I moved through the house on instinct alone. I made soup she could barely swallow. I changed blood-stained sheets. I wiped her forehead when she whimpered in her sleep. And all the while, my mind worked relentlessly, searching for a way out of the cage we were trapped in. At 7:30 p.m., I stood up. My legs were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the table to steady myself. From the back of a drawer, I retrieved a small, empty cough syrup bottle, one I'd saved without knowing why. I washed it carefully, dried it, and tucked it into the pocket of my apron. When the clock struck 7:45, I unlocked the kitchen. The glass sat in the refrigerator, covered neatly, waiting. That thick violet liquid glistened under the light, almost beautiful in a sickening way. This was what had stolen my daughter's strength. This was what was killing her. I poured a portion into the bottle, my hands shaking so violently I nearly spilled it. The smell made my stomach turn, sweet, chemical, wrong. I sealed it tightly and hid it against my body, my heart pounding so loud I was sure Lily could hear it. Then I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I brought the glass to her. "No, Mommy," she whispered, tears sliding down her hollow cheeks. "Please, it hurts." I swallowed my sob. "Just one more time, my love," I said softly. "I promise." She trusted me. She always did. She drank. Seconds later, her body went limp in my arms. I carried her to bed, kissed her forehead, and whispered a vow I had no idea how to keep. Hold on. That night I didn't sit by her side. I sat alone at the table, staring at the hidden bottle like it was a ticking bomb. Inside it was the truth and possibly my only weapon, but truth is useless if you can't move it. Daniel controlled everything: the money, the car, my time. Even my footsteps, and then I remembered something. 2 blocks from Daniel's workplace was a small independent lab run by a family from church. People I'd known for years, people who trusted me. Hope, small and dangerous, flickered to life. By morning, I would take that risk, because waiting any longer wasn't an option, and if I failed, I knew exactly what the cost would be. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my heart already racing as if it had never slowed through the night. Daniel was in the bathroom, the sound of running water masking my breathing as I lay still, staring at the ceiling. I waited, I counted. I listened for every small sound, terrified he might sense something had shifted. When he finally left for work, he kissed Lily's forehead as she slept and told me he'd be late. His voice was calm, ordinary. That calm frightened me more than shouting ever could. I waited 30 minutes after the front door closed. 30 full minutes, watching the clock, making sure he wouldn't return for forgotten keys or papers. Only then did I move. I dressed Lily carefully. She was so weak she could barely lift her head. I wrapped her in a sweater despite the mild weather and carried her outside. The morning air felt sharp, almost unreal, like the world had no idea what was at stake. The bottle was hidden deep in my handbag, wrapped in cloth so it wouldn't clink. With every step, I expected to hear Daniel's car pulling up beside us. Every stranger's glance felt like an accusation. The laboratory sat on a quiet street, white walls, blue lettering, glass doors reflecting the gray sky. I stood outside for a moment, frozen. If I walked in, there was no turning back. I would be choosing danger over obedience, truth over safety. I looked down at Lily. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused. Her breathing was shallow, that decided it. Inside, the air smelled of disinfectant. A young technician stood behind the counter. When I placed the bottle in front of her, my hands shook so badly it rattled against the surface. "I need to know what's in this," I said. "Everything." She looked at Lily, then back at me. "Complete analysis?" "Yes, please." The cost felt enormous, but I paid without hesitation. Money meant nothing anymore. Time was all that mattered. When she asked for my name, my throat closed. Fear tightened around my chest like a fist. I shook my head. "I can't." She hesitated only a moment, then nodded, writing something else instead. No questions, no judgment, just quiet understanding. "It'll take a few days," she said gently. Those words felt unbearable. I left, clutching Lily close, knowing I had crossed an invisible line. The rest of the day blurred together. I fed her what little she could tolerate. I smiled when Daniel came home. I obeyed. I survived. But inside, I counted hours. Because once that result came back, nothing would be the same again. And deep down, I already knew the truth I'd asked for was going to destroy the life I thought I had or save the one that truly mattered. The waiting was worse than the fear. Those 3 days stretched longer than any years I had lived before them. Time moved strangely, thick and slow, like the air before a storm that refuses to break. Every morning I woke in a panic, pressing my ear to Lily's chest to make sure her heart was still beating. Every night I forced myself to smile, to act normal, to pretend nothing had changed. Daniel noticed nothing or pretended not to. He resumed the ritual himself, standing beside her with that same rigid posture, watching every swallow as if monitoring an experiment. Lily grew so weak she fainted even without the drink. Her lips turned faintly blue. Sometimes I couldn't tell if she was asleep or something worse. On the third morning, I couldn't wait any longer. As soon as Daniel left for work, I wrapped Lily in a coat and carried her back downtown. My legs trembled the entire way. I didn't pray anymore. I was afraid of what the answer would be and equally afraid of what it wouldn't. The technician recognized me immediately. Her face told me everything before she even spoke. "The results came in yesterday," she said quietly, handing me a sealed envelope. I opened it right there, the words blurred at first. I read them again, then again, and finally they became clear, sharp, and unbearable. Automotive antifreeze, sedative compounds, toxic levels, lethal over time. The floor seemed to tilt. Someone caught my arm before I collapsed. It wasn't my imagination, it wasn't paranoia, it wasn't a mistake. My husband had been poisoning our child. The technician didn't hesitate. "You need to go to the police. Now," she made copies, her hands moving quickly, professionally. "Go to the downtown precinct, ask for someone senior." I didn't go home. I walked straight into the police station carrying my dying daughter and the truth clenched in my fist. Words poured out of me, broken, frantic, unstoppable. The officers' expressions changed as they read the report. A doctor was called. An ambulance followed. They went to find Daniel. When he arrived, escorted in calmly, he didn't fight. He didn't shout. He smiled. "Ah," he said softly when he saw me. "You figured it out." I didn't answer, because in that moment my only thought was Lily. At the hospital, everything moved fast, too fast. Machines, doctors, alarms, they spoke in urgent tones I barely understood. Kidney failure, internal bleeding, severe poisoning, they rushed her away. I sat in a chair, shaking, staring at my hands that had once held that glass. But even as the worst truth settled into my bones, one thing became painfully clear: the danger was finally exposed. And now, the fight for my daughter's life had truly begun. Hospitals have a way of stealing your sense of time. Days blur into nights under fluorescent lights, and minutes stretch endlessly while you wait for someone else to decide the fate of the person you love most. Lily was taken straight into intensive care. Tubes were attached to her fragile body. Machines hummed and beeped, doing the work her organs could no longer manage on their own. A doctor explained everything in careful, measured words: renal failure, internal damage, toxicity that had been building for weeks. I nodded, but I barely heard him. All I could see was my child, so small in that bed, fighting a battle she never chose. A police detective visited me later that evening. He spoke gently but directly. Daniel had been evaluated. The confession came easily. Too easily. According to the psychiatrist, Daniel suffered from severe untreated delusional disorder. He believed the world was corrupt, dangerous, filled with forces that would destroy his daughter if she grew up. In his mind, weakening her body was an act of protection. He wasn't trying to kill her, he said. He was trying to release her before the world could harm her. Hearing that made something inside me go numb. The man I married hadn't snapped overnight. He had been unraveling slowly, quietly, while I mistook control for care and silence for peace. The doctor said he would be committed indefinitely. He would never come near us again. I didn't feel relief, not yet. Weeks passed. Lily hovered between life and death. Some days were hopeful, others crushed me completely. I slept in a chair beside her bed, afraid that if I left even for a moment, she would slip away. Eventually, the doctors told me the truth I had been dreading. Her kidneys were too damaged. She would need a transplant. I didn't hesitate. Tests were run, forms were signed. In early spring of the following year, I gave my daughter one of my kidneys. When I woke from surgery and they told me it was working, that her body had accepted it, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. Recovery was slow, painful, messy, but Lily survived. Healing didn't mean forgetting. For years, I couldn't look at dark liquids without feeling sick. I woke at night checking doors, windows, locks. Fear stayed with me like a shadow. But children have a way of pulling you back into the light. One afternoon, months later, Lily climbed into my lap and said, "Mommy, the bad man is gone. You don't have to be scared anymore." That was the moment I realized survival wasn't enough. I had to learn how to live again. And that choice to step forward instead of staying frozen would define everything that came next. Surviving something like that doesn't end when the hospital doors close behind you, it follows you home. It sits quietly at the edge of your days, waiting to see whether you will let it define you or whether you will define yourself again. Lily grew stronger month by month. Her color returned. Her laugh came back, hesitant at first, then louder, freer. Physical therapy rebuilt her body, and time, slow, patient time, helped heal what medicine could not. She carried scars she couldn't see, and so did I, but we carried them together. I never returned to the woman I was before. That woman trusted too easily. She believed silence was peace and obedience was love. Instead, I became someone firmer. Someone who listened when her instincts spoke, even if her voice trembled while answering them. Years passed. Lily grew into a resilient, compassionate woman. She studied, built a life, and surrounded herself with people who treated her gently, not carefully, not fearfully, but with real respect. Today, she has a family of her own, and every time I watch her laugh with them, I am reminded how close I came to losing everything. As for me, I chose a quiet life. I found comfort in small routines: morning coffee, gardening, long walks, familiar faces. Peace became my luxury. I didn't need much else. Sometimes on calm afternoons, I still think about how evil rarely announces itself. It doesn't always arrive with violence or shouting. Sometimes it arrives holding a glass, speaking softly, asking for trust. And that is why stories like this must be told, not to spread fear but awareness. If there is one lesson I leave you with, it is this: never let politeness silence your intuition. Never ignore that tight feeling in your chest just because the person in front of you is respected, educated, or loved. Question, pause. Protect, especially when it comes to those who cannot protect themselves. I shared this story not for sympathy but for purpose. Because if even one person listening chooses to act sooner, to ask one more question, to trust their instincts, then every painful memory becomes worth carrying. Thank you for staying with me until the end. Thank you for listening to something that was not easy to hear. If this story moved you, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel so more real stories can be shared. And most importantly, comment your thoughts below. Your voice matters more than you think. Thank you for watching. May awareness keep you safe and courage guide your choices.